Alright guys, so we're going to do the next part to the 6.5-inch subwoofer comparison, and this time we have the Toro Fierce in the box. We've looked at this a little bit earlier. Getting these direct leads to wire up was a very terrible time, so I've got them in there. We're going to drop them in, we're going to hook some power to them, and see more about them. Alright, so we got these hooked up now. Let's go ahead and do the SMD meter and play some music and see the same thing like the last time, how much power they can handle and also what they sound like here on the bench. Then we'll put them in the car. Okay, so we put this in the real-time power mode so we can see the power numbers that are coming out of this thing. Let's pick a song and go from there. Okay. Okay, so we're holding well around 600 watts, a little bit more. Close to 700 watts, we're actually holding a little bit of power. So that's actually pretty good. Let's do one more thing. All right, let's see if these will shred the manual they came with. Whew, I hope I don't need that. Let's try it out. This is 1,000 watts on a little bit of a burp there, and yeah, it definitely shredded the manual. You can smell them just a little bit. They don't feel hot, but it definitely took just over 1,000 watts right there on a burp. Pretty neat little subs. I've got these set up in the box like this because of the way the leads are. They really just make it kind of hard to wire in the box. I'm not really a fan of that style. If you like it, you like it. If you don't, you don't. They're holding some pretty good power. Let's do one more song to see, you know, the dynamic side of the sound, not just the amount of air they can produce. So they definitely play a little more toward the higher side than the lower side, but they still hit plenty low. They're having a hard time keeping the groups together compared to the Sundown that can't keep the audio groups together. They're almost like they're fluttering just a little bit too much, but they're playing those higher frequencies really, really well. So my thoughts were that these subwoofers would work pretty well in an infinite baffle style with no box, and it appears that that could be correct the way that they're acting in this box here. They really need just a little bit more space. All right, let's put these in the car and see what they do there. All right, so we're gonna do the same thing. We're gonna play actual music this time because I just don't like some of the cheaper stuff. May just have to blur some of this out, but check this out. Okay, so these subs actually push quite a bit of air, and I'm noticing that they are taking the power a lot better than the Sundown. So these things are actually seeming like they're producing a similar amount of bass, especially in my car. It's pretty well set up for it, but you can see that it's moving this right here. This is really heavy. This is my bass dangler, but it's is pretty heavy. So the fact that it's even moving some of this is pretty cool. It's hard to tell, but this dude right here is just shaking like all get out. This little console thing on the top, and this little flap is rattling like crazy. More so than the Sundown, which is super interesting, actually. So the Toro is actually maybe just a little bit louder. I've noticed that the Sundown actually bottomed out quite a few times, and I couldn't get up on my knob without bottoming it. And I do have my clipping indicator, so I'm not running you know, a clip signal. Everything's nice and clean, but even then the Sundown could not handle the full tilt on this knob, whereas these little dudes are taking it like a champ. As you can see on the bench, they were taking well over the same power the Sundown would. The Sundown is bottoming out on that T-yoke on the back plate, so definitely not something I would enjoy. But they did sound a little better. They did have a better group to them, whereas these guys are actually pretty loud. So there's definitely a difference in the way they sound and the way they perform, and these ones performed quite a bit more shakingly. So if you want a windy sub, these are definitely a more windy sub than the Sundown, especially on the same power. You got to realize in these tests, power is not an issue. We are not underpowering these subwoofers. If anything, we are exceeding their rated power by far in some cases. So, okay, so that's the second woofer. We have 2 more to go, and we will do those as time goes on. And let me know what you guys think about the Sundown so far, and now the Toro. The next one we're going to check out is the CT and see if it compares to either of these 2 woofers for better or for worse. Okay guys, so you got to see the first 2 of the 4 subwoofers side by side. The first one being the Sundown, and the second one being the Toro. They're on 2 different sides of the spectrum. The Sundown's more expensive, the Toro's a little bit more on the cheaper side, but you can see that they are 2 entirely different subwoofers when it comes to how they perform. The Sundown was a bit more punchy and a bit more accurate, but it bottomed out when you were hitting those low notes, and you know, that's kind of a no-go for me, because sometimes you want that little bit of flutter, and you just don't want to have to worry about smacking that pole on the back plate, which it was doing somewhere around 1,000 watts. And the Toro was not doing that. It was taking well over 1,000 watts. Even if it was hitting mechanical limits, it still wasn't bottoming out the coil. So those are things to take into consideration. The Toro could use quite a bit bigger box. You can see it was very windy. According to my specs, it would work in a much different application, but it still did very, very well in this application. The Sundown seemed like it did okay. In fact, it actually blew me away in the beginning of just how loud it was. Both subwoofers have their place, and if you take anything away from this, just think about the fact that different subwoofers act differently, and certain ones will work better in certain situations than another, and you can't just be picking one brand over another. That being said, we have 2 subwoofers left. They're both from CT Sounds. They're both, one is obviously quite a bit bigger and it should play quite a bit lower, and the other one is obviously similar to the 2 that we've tested just now. If the TROPO ends up being very similar to the ones we have now, that could be a good product to buy for certain reasons. One of which, it's a lot cheaper. The Toro is actually kind of seeming like a really good product, but I imagine that the MESO is just going to be that much better in all categories. I've seen them before, and I know how they perform, and they're actually not that much more expensive. Sometimes you can get them on sale for $99, and that makes them the best buy out of all these woofers. That being said, the next woofer we're going to test will be the TROPO, and in the same box, and I'm curious to see, because that's the one that I wanted to know the most. That's the one that kind of started this whole thing, was, hey, why don't we check out the TROPO? Is the TROPO actually a good woofer or no? And what is it like on the market? What does it compare to? So we're going to get into that on the next video. And also check out the Facebook page if you haven't already. That's where most of this stuff is coming from. The Facebook page, linked below. It's right here. The All Things Car Audio. These are my little bass danglers. Before long, I'll actually end up selling these bass danglers and some t-shirts. And if you have just your bass dangler on the string and you don't have all this other stuff on there that's sentimental to me, they dance around pretty cool. If you'd like to pick one of those up, you can check out the Facebook page and see what we're doing over there, plus the monthly giveaways and all the other cool, fun stuff we're doing on the Facebook page. Come check it out, join us and have a wonderful time there. That being said, I appreciate you guys watching. Thank you very much, and I'll see you in the next video. Stay clean, don't clip your stuff, and have a wonderful time.